James Silas had a fiery personality, which matched his one-on-one ability that saw him blow by people, slithering through defenses like a snake. But it was his amazing knack for making the big shot in the clutch that earned him multiple nicknames in reference to his late-game heroics. He was a battler, a hustler, and competitor. When the coach needed someone to come through, he called on. James Silas grew up in the small town of Tallulah, Louisiana. He graduated from McCall High School to play basketball for the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks. Standing at only 6'2", he quickly displayed the ability to jump with men much taller, and one local sports writer described him as being quicker than 10 cats. Part of a squad called the Super Six, he would use his speed to demoralize foes, often stealing inbound passes. From his sophomore to junior season, the team won 33 straight games and made it into the third round of the NAIA tournament. Crowds at the Lumberjack games chanted "Snake" whenever Silas slithered to the basket. There were high hopes during his senior season. In one game, he made 18 out of 18 free throws and was called the greatest shooter Stephen F. Austin ever had, as he averaged 30.7 points a game. But his college career was cut short halfway through his senior season, as he was declared academically ineligible. In 1972, Silas would be drafted by the Pittsburgh Condors of the ABA, and in the fifth round by the NBA's Houston Rockets. He signed with Houston, but then felt doubtful about his chances. They had a lot of guards, Silas said. All the others were practically all no-cut. I could see right off I wasn't going to get a real chance. After scoring 12 points in 12 minutes in an exhibition game against the Dallas Chaparrals, Silas was cut. The dismissal would be a blow to Silas's morale, as he was a star in college and now could see that he was better than most of the players in the pros. I wasn't bitter, Silas said, but it was one of the lowest feelings I ever had. The Chaparrals of the ABA were impressed with him, however. They signed Silas, and he rewarded the team with 13 points per game as a rookie. But the Chaparrals didn't acquire a fan base in Dallas. The team was leased to Red McCombs and Angelo Drossos and were now called the San Antonio Spurs. Silas became the captain, tossing in 15 points per game in his second year, 19 in his third, and led the team with 23.8 points per game in his fourth year. He earned a reputation for being a go-to player for late-game heroics, as Silas won or tied games 11 times in the last seconds during his third year. I always could shoot, Silas said, and it just so happened that I ran a certain play we had better than anyone else we had. That's why they kept going to me. His fourth quarter play soon became the stuff of legends. When there was no spot to shoot from, he called upon his legs, full of youthful spring and lateral movement, to transport him to daylight. He was showing the NBA what they had missed out on. The way he scored points, Spurs center Billy Pault said, he would come up to a guy and it was like a personal challenge. He never shot an open shot. The way he did it got him an undefined respect. But injuries began to plague Silas's career. In 1975, he broke his ankle during Game 1 of the playoff semifinals. At the start of the 1976 season, Kansas City's Bill Robenzien fell on Silas's left knee. Robenzien escaped uninjured. Silas played a few more minutes before his knee began to tighten. On his drive back home, Silas could not get out of his car. The cartilage in his knee was torn, and he needed surgery. Thus began his winter of discontent as he would glumly sit on the sidelines, watching his team play without him. It all came down at me at one time, Silas said. Everything, the leagues merging, the injury, I just never had time to show them anything. I really wanted to go against the Earl Monroes, the Walt Fraziers, and the Pete Maraviches, to let them know this guy could compete with them. Silas returned near the end of the 1976-77 season, but for every positive moment came more negatives. He scored 28 points one night, but the next morning he could barely walk as his knee swelled up to grotesquely large proportions. Specialists now believe that Silas had degenerative arthritis. One of his nicknames, the late James Silas, was starting to sound more like the early end of his career. Captain Late was now becoming Captain Done. Silas himself began to think maybe his career was over and that his hard work was futile, as even walking became a problem. He noticed that the shape of his knee looked different, icing it up after every game. A lot of days I felt like giving up, Silas said, but I'd never played in the NBA. I felt like I had to show these people, not to prove myself, but just to let them see that I could play with the best. Coach Doug Moe didn't think he would be able to play as Silas's knee swelled up after every practice. I had resigned myself to thinking he wouldn't be able to play, Moe said. 2 years post-injury, Silas's basketball future looked bleak. But in the 1978-79 season, he finally turned the corner. All of a sudden, things changed for me, Silas said. Like something happened overnight. I got to play some, then I got the knee out of my mind. There were a lot of mental things with it, and all of a sudden, they've got you. Silas finished the season with a 16-point scoring average. Making the playoffs, Silas now had confidence in his knee. I had gotten to the point where I didn't have to ice it down, Silas said. It didn't bother me as much the next day. Silas's confidence also returned. During the playoff series with the Philadelphia 76ers, Silas boasted that there was no way anyone on the Sixers, including Maurice Cheeks, could stop him. Silas and the Spurs would defeat the 76ers in 7 games, but fall to the Washington Bullets in the Eastern Conference Finals. The good news was that the old Silas was back, as he averaged 19 points a game in the playoffs. Doug put pressure on me when he made me a starter, Silas said. And it was good for me. I approached the game differently as a starter. It made me come much more ready to play when I knew I'd have a major role every night. Assistant coach George Karl believed that Silas was 85 to 90% of his old self physically, but 100 to 110% of his old self mentally. I'm not as strong as I was, Silas admitted, but I control the floor better and I pass better. I'm into the game more than just my own offense. Meanwhile, opposing teams and the media focused on Silas's high-scoring teammate, George the Iceman Gervin. Silas was overshadowed by Gervin, but he neared an 18 points per game scoring average during that year. I'm at a point now in my game where I can do anything I want to, Silas said. It's amazing. I think about the trouble it gave me, and now it's like it never happened. Now 31 years old, he continued to play with the enthusiasm of a rookie. His attitude was infectious to the rest of the team. Once he was clawed across his face, returning to the bench with a cut over his nose. The trainer applied a Band-Aid on the wound, and Silas returned to action like nothing ever happened. Things were looking up in the 1980-81 season when the Spurs finished with a record of 52-30. The team had added muscle with Dave Corzine and George Johnson under center. With Silas riding shotgun to George Gervin, the Spurs became a threat. "We are for real," Silas said. "We are thinking championship. This is the best I've felt since coming to San Antonio. This team can run, we can come from behind, and we can now make things happen on defense. This is the best in the franchise's history." But the playoffs came, and the Spurs suffered a heartbreaking Game 7 loss to the Houston Rockets, the same team that originally cut Silas. Months later, the Spurs traded Silas to the Cleveland Cavaliers for cash and a second-round draft pick. Silas called the Spurs greedy and the management jerks. Now at 32 years old, Silas thought he had 2 or 3 seasons left. He wanted to be seen as a leader on the new-look Cleveland Cavaliers squad. "I'm not looking for a career here," Silas said. "I've had mine. I still feel I'm one of the best guards in the NBA." However, injuries continued to plague him. In October of 1982, Silas walked out of practice after a confrontation with owner Ted Stepien, who believed that he was no longer capable of playing. Silas contended that Stepien offered him money to leave the team. "I was supposed to agree to take some money," Silas said, "a 6-figure amount, and then say I was leaving the club because I had a knee problem, or I could say whatever I wanted. But they picked the wrong guy to ask. I'm not going to end my career that way. If I'm not injured, I plan to play." Silas was released and became a free agent. He never played professional basketball again. "I think the injury cheated me out of some of the good parts of my career," Silas said. "I'm not saying the knee took some of my better ones away. I've enjoyed the game. I've got a lot of great things done. In 1984, the San Antonio Spurs would retire James Silas as number 13. Silas then started basketball youth clinics, coaching with his son, and starting the Austin Midnight Basketball League for at-risk youth. James Silas will live in Spurs history forever, former teammate Joe Hamilton said. He played his heart out, night after night. He was a game changer. He left it all on the court.